I'm, as you say, the past president of the Faculty of Forensic and Legal Medicine, and that was formed in 2006, and it was the first new faculty that they formed for 20 years, and it consists of forensic physicians. That's people who do general forensic medicine work and sexual assault work, the medical legal advisors of the UK defence organisations, and also medical coroners. And we were asked to do something on forensic and legal medicine. So in fact, what I'm going to talk about ageing and bruising. My colleague, Dr. Kath White, who is Vice President Forensic Practitioner, is going to talk about injuries that occur in sexual assault cases. And then Dr. Andrew Reid, who is Her Majesty's Coroner for Inner London North, is going to talk about evidence in legal medicine and related to coronial work. So it's not all going to be on ageing and bruising. So if you think you're going to get an hour on the ageing and bruising, I'm sorry if we might disappoint you a little bit, but we hope it'll be interesting for you in any event. Now, what I want to do is look at the physiology behind colour changes in bruising, and then look at the evidence base behind ageing of bruising. The first thing is we need to look at a few definitions, and really, what is a bruise? Well, certainly it's basically bleeding into the tissues. It can be under the skin, it can be within muscles, it can be within internal organs. Some people call it by other names, and some of the descriptions have a specific forensic meaning. So a particular pinpoint bruise would be regarded as a bruise that is no bigger than 2 millimeters in diameter. Well, why is ageing and bruising so important? Well, the reason is that it's potentially very important in terms of crime. Did the person commit the crime? Could they have been in a different place? It couldn't possibly have been them because they weren't there. And it's also very important in child protection proceedings where we see children with bruises. So, how can we age a bruise? Well, one of the things we can do is we can take a history. Swelling might suggest that the bruise is more recent. There may be some associated features such as abrasions and stuff, which may also give some clue as to how old the injury is. And we then may be able to tell something from the colour change in the bruise. Pathologists can sometimes age an injury by histological methods, but obviously in the living we can't really resort to those methods. So let's just have a little look about the history of ageing, of bruising. And this is what some experts said, well, in 1955. Red colour changes to purple, almost to black, very soon after the injury. 4 or 5 days we start to get green. 7 to 10 days it becomes yellow. It gradually disappears in 14 to 15 days. So fairly precise ageing. About 25 years ago, when I started doing forensic medicine, I saw a child with a bruise on her cheek, and the police said to me, "How old is this bruise?" And I said, "Well, I'm really not sure." Anyway, a consultant paediatrician looked at this bruise, and he said that this bruise was between 3 days old and 8 days old. And I thought, gosh, how does he tell that? How does he know it's not 7 days old? And I thought, well, maybe he just sees hundreds and hundreds of bruises, and I perhaps haven't seen enough, and I'm going to need to look at hundreds and hundreds more bruises, and then I'll be able to say whether a bruise is 3 days old and 7 days old. But it puzzled me a little bit. So what I want to do is just look at really what the evidence is. And first of all, we just start looking a little bit at the science. A bruise is caused by blood, which is from hemoglobin and typically is red blue. It then is metabolized by an enzyme, heme oxygenase, to biliverdin, which is green, and then it's metabolized further to bilirubin, which is yellow. Now, what I've got here is a sequence of of bruises. Now, would anybody like to tell me, and if we go by top left, then bottom left, top right, and bottom right, which is the most recent? Left, top left, okay. Which one is between 19 and 36 hours old? Any takers? Okay. Anyone like to say which is between 37 and 54 hours old? Okay. Well, it just goes to show it's quite tricky, isn't it? This one here was 15 hours old. Okay. This one here is 20 hours old. Okay. This one here is 38 hours old. And this one is 87 hours old. Now I think, probably all agree there's some yellow coloration here. Anyone think there's yellow coloration here? The people who took the pictures say there were, but I think you can already see it's not quite that easy, is it? Now, do patterns of injury help? Well, here's somebody with some bruises on their arm, and unfortunately the pattern of those may give some clues to causation, but it doesn't necessarily help with aging. So let's have a look at some of the research. Now, Pilling, Venesis, Perrett and Johnson, they did an experiment where they used a suction pump to create bruises, okay, and they took pictures of them, and they got 15 forensic experts asked to age them and place them in chronological order. They found that there was a lot of variation between observers and within the same observers, and some of them, the mean difference was 26 hours. In fact, there were some extremes in that study that one person was out by 19 days. Okay, so it just goes to show that you can't always tell. And these were so-called forensic experts. I haven't quite found out who they were yet, but only 39% got the true age of the bruise when they were in 12 to 24 hour time bands. They concluded, though, that bruise age estimates looking from photographs are unreliable, but it was easier to place the sequence, the bruise in sequential chronological order. Now, if we look a little bit more about colour change in bruises, probably the most well-known study was the study by Neil Langlois and Professor Gresham from Cambridge in 1991. Professor Gresham was Professor of Pathology at Cambridge, and Neil Langlois is a forensic pathologist now in the Antipodes. But they looked at 390 subjects where they knew how old the bruises were, and they sequentially photographed them. And they found that red, blue, purple, black could appear really pretty much any time, but yellow coloration didn't appear before 18 hours old. That doesn't mean to say that if there's not yellow in the bruise, it's less than 18 hours old, but if there was yellow coloration, and these were people aged between 10 and 90, they concluded that the bruise was more than 18 hours old. So that's all well and good, but the question then is, can we agree on what colour there is in a bruise? And this was a study from Royal Hospital for Sick Children in Edinburgh, and they looked at 44 children involved in child protection proceedings with 58 bruises. And what they got was they got the 3 observers to look at the bruise actually live, as it were. The bruise was then photographed, and then they were asked at a later date to describe again the bruises, and they tried to see if they agreed on what they saw from the photograph compared to what they saw live. And there was quite a variation between observers. Okay, and only less than a third did they agree on the findings and the colour in the bruise. So they concluded that really there was a lot of variability in colour description in terms of estimating ages of bruises from photographs. This was in children. So, not so much can we agree on the colour now, but can we actually recognise yellow colour? Well, this was a study, again a follow-up study from Neil Langlois, and what they did was they got 50 subjects who they had got normal colour vision, and they showed them a series of photographs of a bruise. And what they were able to do was, using, I think it was Adobe Photoshop, they were able to steadily enhance the amount of yellow coloration in the bruise. And they found that people had a different perception of yellow, ranging from yellow at 4% to 16%. Gender didn't seem to make any difference, but age of the person did. And they calculated that your threshold for perceiving yellow, effectively, you need more yellow in a colour as you get older, such that somebody aged 25 would perceive yellow at 2% less than somebody aged 65. So that there is a variability amongst individuals as to being able to recognise the yellow colour. Now, Peter Vanessis and his team at the Cameron Centre at Barts in London, they've recently done a study, which I don't think is published yet, but they presented it in the International Association of Forensic Scientists last month. And they were looking at yellow coloration in people of South Asian origin to see if you could recognise yellow colour. And they, we showed one study earlier where people artificially created bruises with suction. They have a machine where you put your arm out and they drop a weight down a plastic tube onto your arm to give a controlled bruise, as it were. And then they found that in fact, it was harder to, perhaps not surprisingly, perceive yellow coloration in a bruise in people of South Asian origin. So, let's just have a little bit more of a look at children. This was a big series review and by Barisiak, and they found that red, purple, blue were seen more commonly under 48 hours, yellow, brown more often after 7 days, but also a quarter of them had those colours in less than 48 hours. Stevenson and Bialis did a study where they showed photographs to paediatricians and asked them to estimate the age of the bruising, and they were only correct in just over 50% of cases. Red colour again seemed to appear earlier, yellow colour later, but they really concluded that aging of bruises in children in terms of colour change is less reliable. There certainly is some new methods looking at bruises now by ultraviolet light, where you might not be able to see them by naked eye, reflectance spectroscopy and tri-stimulus colorimetry. And there's various research projects going on about those. But I think the evidence at the moment is certainly from the science, it's not very clear. So I wondered if we could learn anything from music and the arts. Is anybody here a Coldplay fan? No? Well, they've got two quite famous records that I thought might just help us a little bit. One is called Yellow. Yeah? Okay. And this is a bit from Yellow. Your skin, 'cause you are all yellow. So they've obviously been thinking about this. There is another Coldplay record called The Scientist. And I thought this was rather apt as well. Nobody said it was easy. Oh, take me back to the start. Running in circles, chasing tails, coming back as we are. I think it probably has gone full circle, because if you looked at what Bernard Knight said, and he's probably one of the most famous living forensic pathologists, now retired, but he actually said you really can't accurately age bruises, and I think he was probably correct on that. So what can we conclude? Well, certainly in an adult, yellow bruise is likely to be more than 18 hours old. You need to be very cautious in aging and bruising. And aging and bruising in children is currently very unreliable. So on that note, I will finish off with something where hopefully you can see bright yellow. I normally finish on a slide with carriage driving, and I'll try and answer any questions. Thank you.
Just as a matter of interest, because I'm a specialist in sexual health and I do see a lot of young patients, and sometimes you're worried about child protection issue. Now, is it the color of the bruises, would it change faster in children compared with adults? I mean, would it change within 24 hours, coming from red to yellow or something? No, I'm just guessing.
Yeah, no, there's
no reliable...
There's no clear research on the rate of change of bruising that I'm aware of.
Okay, well, thank you.
It's still so variable, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Very interesting, thanks.